Cool. Welcome to the Most High Show with Mitchell and Christian. We're here in the rooftops of Buckhead. We broke in and started setting up stuff, and because we're white, people think we belong here.
Hope security doesn't find us.
So this is the second of this little series where we're doing podcasts in places you wouldn't normally do podcasts.
Yeah, I've never seen anybody do a podcast on the roof.
Not yet.
Not here.
Not yet.
Not in Buckhead.
Until now. And so today in this podcast, what we wanted to do was we're trying to take a different approach as far as what and how we're approaching the topic. And so what we did is we identified a specific person. And what we want to do is really speak to this person, whoever they are. We don't have an individual in mind, but the person is somebody who is in the middle of a situation. Maybe you're in early recovery. Maybe you're starting your life over and you want to fast forward. You want to hit the skip button. And as tempting as it sounds, it doesn't usually pan out well. And so that's who we want to talk to. Yeah?
I think that demographic would be perhaps people who may be trying to get sober.
Yeah.
People that may be suffering from a horrific substance abuse.
Yeah.
Lost the word. Substance abuse.
We don't usually do this at night, so that's a little different. We normally
a
do
horrific drug habit. How about that?
There you go.
Yeah.
You might need to cuss a little bit tonight.
I don't know. I'm trying to quit. So I do remember when I got sober and I went to treatment. So when I went to treatment, they detoxed me, and then they told me I should probably stay for several weeks. And near the end of 6 weeks of substance abuse treatment, inpatient, I lived at a hospital, so to speak, with other people who were in treatment and were sobering up. They explained to me that I might want to consider going to some type of transitional housing. It was called 3/4 housing.
Yeah.
So they considered us to be at that time in a halfway house, but we were on property at a hospital.
Well,
but it resembled normal housing in some ways. So the 3/4 house was set up to be structured, monitored, drug testing, counselors, but it was actually in the community.
Yeah.
So
a little more freedom.
Not everyone realized that we were part of a program, but we were being given a little bit of freedom, but not too much too quickly. So anyway, I back up. It was suggested that I should embrace this kind of transitional housing or 3/4 house.
Yeah.
And at first I was resistant to it. And it sounds funny, but I just want to go back to my old lifestyle.
Right. Just minus drugs or something.
Yeah, I thought it would be pretty straightforward. Just go on with life.
Right.
And what I didn't realize was I wasn't ready. And they explained to me that if you're not careful, you're going to be dead or in prison very soon. Or at least that's what people in your position tend to do.
Right.
They die and go to prison pretty quickly if they don't transition properly. So I sucked it up and spent several months in transitional housing, and I think it was one of the best choices that I've ever made.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure at the time, you've done 6 weeks probably intensive therapy and treatment, and you've talked about your emotions, your feelings, and you're like, now it's like, okay, let's move on. And then they throw this at you to say, no, a little bit more, take another step. Yeah.
Yeah. It didn't feel great to hear at the time, but it was such a blessing. And I can't really describe accurately in words how it can be so confusing.
Oh, it's popping off.
when you have a blessing so amazing in front of you and just have no idea. So anytime I see somebody in that position, I try to relate to them how fortunate they are, because most people don't get the opportunity to go to transitional 3-quarter housing
Right.
in a, an advanced society. People are dying out there under bridges and sleeping on benches, and I didn't realize how fortunate I was. So looking back, it was amazing. It was a gift, and I hope anybody that is considering transitional housing or is in it now can get some relief hearing that it can be a real blessing.
Yeah. For me, I went to an intensive inpatient place, and they locked the doors, but it wasn't like you couldn't leave. It was kind of in the middle of nowhere. And I remember it was my 6 to 8 weeks, and I remember a certain period of time when my emotions started coming back, and I had this great sense of guilt and shame, and for the way I had been treating my family and my kids and my wife and everyone who loved me. And I wanted to just leave and do something about it. That was my everything in me was like, I'm just going to go. They're really intentional about not letting you leave your car. Like, someone has to drop you off, because if your car's there, it's too easy. And I mean, every day I had that thought, and every day someone had to talk me down from that, or I had to talk myself down from it. I couldn't wait for the day to get out and start making things better. But the reality is that I needed to continue to heal so that I would be in a place where I could actually begin to make things better. And shoot, it wasn't for, a year or two until I think I actually did start making things better. It took that long for me to even out and get a little bit of control of my emotions and my thoughts. But there were a couple people who left. They left early. And, the probability that they're still sober is really low. This thing's dropping off. Hey, Lefty, you kind of...
So,
yeah, there you go.
I'm starting to remember what it was like. I had a flashback to my first drive away from a monitored environment.
Yeah.
And I remember driving back to the home where I lived before, and I had all these thoughts and emotions and intrusive thoughts flying at me, because I would remember, I used to get loaded over there.
Yeah.
I used to buy this over there.
Get the bubble guts.
Yeah, and I couldn't put my bags down quick enough and get to a meeting.
Right.
A lot of us go to meetings.
Yes.
Whether it's at a church or
Wherever.
a local clubhouse or what have you, men's group. Typically, something about meeting with other people with our afflictions tends to help us grow and stay on the path of health and wellness. So it was nice to have ingrained that structure that I didn't know I needed, to where once I felt uncomfortable, I knew exactly where to go.
Yeah.
Sanctuary.
Yeah, I mean, I think my first year consisted of going to work, going to meetings, and going home. And sometimes in different orders, but I mean, that was the first year. It was pretty consistent. For me, my company that I worked for at the time had sent me to rehab. My family was a safe place, so I was able to leave the inpatient and go home, because I was the bad influence in my so when I was going into a very stable situation, and so that's what I think why they allowed me to go home. But I think the mindset, what happens, and I'm trying to just kind of really speak to that mindset of, like, it can seem like this shit ain't working. It could seem like, man, no matter I'm not as happy as I should be, or, I'm working this dead end job, or, I can't hear this guy talk about his feelings one more time. And it could just seem like, man, I'm just in this rut. And I totally understand that. And I'm trying not to say anything cliche right now, but, to just hold on for the rest of today.
Don't leave before the miracle happens.
I was trying not to say it. You said it. Because here's the thing, all right? If you're making a commitment to yourself and to others, mainly to yourself, to say, you know what, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to change the substances that I put in my body. I'm going to change the behaviors. I'm going to change my thinking. I'm going to change. Everything about me is going to change. And you take that step towards that goal and then in that direction, right? What's going to be required of you is commitment. And the very idea of quitting or going back on your word is completely undermining some fundamental things that's going to happen for you to recover, which is you have to start being honest, right? You have to start doing what you say you're going to do. You have to start honoring people around you. And so maybe those are the first things that's hitting you where you're going, man, I can get out of here. You're figuring out how can you get away. But again, you're leaning back on that manipulation. You're leaning back on that that tricky thinking your way out of a situation. And it's all lies. It's all falsehoods. It's all fake reality. It's not real. You know what I mean? The reality is where you are right now. It's where you're sitting right now, the home that you're in, the meeting that you're in, the situation that you're in. And it's not to say if you're getting abused in your situation, then that's one thing. Well, I'm talking about if, you're just having doubts if this is going to work, to just stick to it for one more day.
Yeah. I was listening to somebody speak recently about how magical their first year of sobriety was.
It wasn't me.
And I can relate. I remember regularly getting this feeling that would come over me and the hair would stand up on my neck.
Oh, yeah.
But it was amazing. And it was like my brain was restarting and starting to function in a way that I wasn't familiar with. If I wanted the hair to stand up on my neck in the past, I had to abuse some chemical to get that to happen.
Right.
So for this to happen naturally,
yes,
at the time when it's supposed to happen, like a job interview went well, or I heard a beautiful song, or
right.
Saw somebody experience hope for the first time. Once that started happening, I couldn't get enough.
Yes.
And the first year was very difficult, so I don't want to pretend it was just rainbows and butterflies, but it was difficulty and pain mixed in with beauty and sensations that were sustainable and amazing, like I had never experienced. And thinking back to that 3-quarter house, I remember I had this brilliant idea. Everybody around me was getting a job at Publix or at the gym, pretty basic jobs. And, I thought I was going to change the world and start a nonprofit right away. And so, I had this mentor working with me, and he said, just get a damn recovery job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went out and I started working as a sales assistant for an insurance company. And mind you, my previous position was as the principal and the founder of a company in Manhattan. So that was humbling.
Yeah. The recovery job.
And I was told that there's this stuff called humble pie. And at first you might not want to eat humble pie. It might not taste very good to you, but as it turns out, if you keep eating humble pie, it actually starts to taste pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good for you. It has been for me.
Yeah, I think that's what you're explaining is it's like this phenomenon. I think that's common in also in a religious experience. It's like early in the process, there is this kind of, well, I'm thinking of some Christian philosophers who have talked about this, like when you, and they're talking about it in the realm of Christianity. So they're saying that, when you first become a Christian, that there's this continual encouragement that you get from your Heavenly Father. There's this continual kind of, you see miracles every day. You're on fire and you're lit up, and these are all kind of the cliche terms, but that's what kind of happens after you have this spiritual experience. And then as you grow and go, maybe those things happen a little less often. And for some people, they think, okay, well, then that's the proof in the pudding, then nothing really happened, right? But the reality is that that's the strengthening of a spiritual journey. That's the strengthening of your faith is those moments and those days and those seasons and those periods when it's like, am I crazy? Do I really believe what I say I believe? Like, this does not work. This is not working. But you stick to it, because it's like, where else can you go? And I think it's the same, like what you're talking about. I remember when I hit my year, the day I hit the year of sobriety, I was on my way to work. So my work was the ones that sent me to rehab. So they knew. But I started thinking about all the people that God had put in my life that year. Just amazing, loving, kind, generous people. And I just started to weep. I mean, like, this is like snot crying. You know what I mean? Like when you're really crying. So I show up to work. My eyes are all bloodshot red, and I had to go in and ask for Visine, and I had to explain the whole thing. But that emotion, I'm telling you, that was the first time I'd felt that kind of gratitude to the point of weeping. Yeah, like you said, it was that hair standing on the back of my neck. It was that experience of going, whoa, this is new.
It was interesting to start feeling different emotions as a sober human being.
Yeah.
So before I got sober, it was typically joy or anger. Right. And sometimes some fear if the police got behind me.
Right.
But it wasn't very diverse.
Yeah.
And so it was strange to feel sad or to feel terrified of the unknown or to feel guilty. A very strong urge to cry and be very uncomfortable about that, but learn that that's actually therapeutic.
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot of things early on, and I think one of the most helpful things I learned was that if you're upset, it's okay to walk away. And it blew my mind that you can walk away from something that's upsetting you. I thought you had to fight everything head on. That's the only way to do it.
Yeah, right.
So just working through how to deal with emotions in a healthy way took time, and I'm still working on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And so that's the kind of, when you hit certain, I don't know, milestones or seasons, and you can start thinking, all right, I got this. All right, I've cried. I've reconciled in my head and heart my past, and all right, I know what I want to do with my life now. And then it's like, okay, let's just get to that point, And I think this is not unique to a recovery situation. This is unique to human situations, right? Like when someone starts a business, it's like we want to launch and be, blazing day one once we open the doors. Or you want to start working out at the gym and you want to be in there and just be swole after one workout. I mean, you have to go through the process. Anything, and I do believe recovery is spiritual, anything spiritual takes time. This is why Jesus says you reap what you sow. Yeah, you reap what you sow. Because he's explaining that this is a process. This is not a, you don't microwave what you eat. You know what I mean? It's you reap what you sow. You have things have to be the soil has to be made fertile. Then you have to plant a seed. Then you got to water it. Then you got to wait till the right time, and then the plant grows, and you got to protect it. And then it gets up. Then you can, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a whole
I do know what you're saying.
process that has to happen. And so for anyone who's in a situation where they feel like this is not working, you can't see the process unfolding. And that's why what you said, I think, is so true. Like being in community, you have to talk to somebody. You have to tell them. And that's what I did when I was sitting in that rehab. I'm ready to leave. I'm like, you know, one of my good friends, I won't say his name, but I'd go to him, you know, and I've told him plenty of times, you know, if it wasn't for him, I might have left, because he would say, Christian, it's okay. Chill out. Like, you know, you got to do the work here. He would just talk me down off the ledge, you know, because I got out of my head. But if I would have stayed there in my head and thought that through, man, I would have dipped and blew everything up.
Yeah. I think most people would accurately describe us when we're using drugs and alcohol in an abusive manner, and as we're adjusting, once we put down the bottle or whatever substance it is that we're suffering with, I think people would typically describe us as sick. You know, we're not well.
Right.
And I like that description better than, you know, we're bad people.
Yeah.
Because what it seems like is that people with different substance abuse disorders are sick and they need medical treatment. But there's this interesting component where medical doctors have agreed that medical intervention alone is not enough. And they typically recommend some type of spiritual support system, which is interesting. You don't see that in many other areas of the medical community, maybe with cancer and other terminal illnesses. But
I was just thinking that.
My point is that it was described to me that a sick mind can't heal a sick mind. Mm-hmm. And if in fact we are sick and working on getting well, we're going to have to work with some other people who can hopefully help us see where the light is and help us walk toward the light and away from the darkness, because we don't always know which way is the right way to go. And it was explained to me that while I might not be able to think my way out of this poor behavior, I might be able to behave or act in a way that will help me start thinking correctly.
Yeah.
And so that has been my experience.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit at a time. Just a little changes at a time.
Oh, I remember that clearly. I thought, well, maybe I can have a glass of champagne at my wedding, or, you know, maybe I can smoke a little bit of weed. And as I started going and listening to people tell their stories, there was a pattern that when people tried to do that and they were as severely afflicted as me, they always ended up going back to the same behavior patterns, and it always got worse. So for me, I was fortunate that I was able to embrace that and not have to relive it myself.
Yeah, I had a spiritual experience. I met Jesus, and then I quit using. I quit drinking, quit smoking, I quit drugging, I quit doing all that. And then a couple years into that, I allowed myself to begin drinking. And it was different than I would drink and then kind of feel bad. It was like, oh, I can drink. It's fine. So I started drinking. And it was a year, I mean, from when I started drinking again to when I was back doing hard drugs again. I mean, so that's why in this time around here, you know, I always joke, I said, like, I didn't have a drinking problem. It was just all the drugs I bought when I started drinking. That was the problem, right? So now I'm like, I've kind of ruined that for myself. I can't enjoy a hoe garden on a sunny day because I've kind of ruined it, and so I don't get that, but I get other things. So that's why this time around I'm like, I'm not messing with it. I maybe when I'm like hella old, like I know the end is near, and I could ride it out. Maybe I might have a hoe garden.
So what you're saying is, at the end of the marathon, when you can see the finish line, you're just gonna quit and give up then?
Isn't that the end of the Bill W. movie? And he's sitting in the bed, and he's like, "Oh, we made it. We never drank again," and he dies. I'm sorry.
I haven't seen that, but
you gotta watch that. That's a fantastic movie. Yes, you have to watch the Bill W. story. It's amazing.
Well, you were starting off talking about fast forwarding, and
Yeah.
Even as kids, it's like we want to fast forward to be an adult.
Right.
And how foolish does that look in retrospect? I mean, to be a kid again,
Right.
and being a sober adult is not easy, and I'm really glad that I was able to experience that awakening and didn't have the opportunity to fast forward through it. It was really special, and I hope other people can experience that.
Yeah. I'm glad you didn't fast forward either. So then I wouldn't get to have a homie sitting here talking, pontificating on the mic.
Maybe
so
you
thank
would.
you.
Maybe you would. Maybe I would have fast forwarded to this point and be like, how did I get here?
Right.
I wouldn't have
travel.
anything to say.
And then Michael J. Fox is just standing there shaking, just what's up.
Wouldn't know how to explain how I got sober.
Yeah. So don't fast forward. Shoot, I mean, that's just a general principle every day. Get in the moment. Take a second, and I like to say just look up. Shoot, man. I mean, most of the time you look up, especially here in Georgia. I mean, there's some sights to see. There's a tree towering over you or something. I mean, just change your perspective, and that's that fast forward button. That's for suckers. That's for VHSs.
Well, if you still have loved ones around, give them a hug.
Yeah.
If they're not close, call them. And if you need some help, you can call us.
That's right. That's it. Thank you. What a way to sign off. You're
Thank
getting
you.
good at this.
I try.
All right. It's the Most High Show. Peace, y'all.
Bye-bye.